Funding for Overheard with Evan Smith is provided in part by Hilco Partners, Texas Government Affairs Consultancy, and its global healthcare consulting business unit, Hilco Health, and by the Matson McHale Foundation in support of public television, and also by MFI Foundation, improving the quality of life within our community, and also by the Alice Kleberg Reynolds Foundation. And viewers like you, thank you.
I'm Evan Smith. He's a former Iowa congressman who was pro-choice and pro-stem cell research and pro-campaign finance reform, who voted against the use of force in Iraq and the 2003 tax cuts and Newt Gingrich for Speaker. Did I mention he was a Republican? Today, he's President Obama's chairman of the National Endowment for the Humanities. He's Jim Leach. This is Overheard. Is that a vote you'd like to have back now? Because you're a judge or a justice in your case doesn't mean that you're free of personal opinions about things.
You have a dimmer view of him than you have of presidents past.
So when they take your name in vain, you just laugh it off. For the larger issue, though, in your mind, is that it's not about whether there ought to be a death penalty, but whether the death penalty as administered is fair. Mr. Chairman, welcome.
Well, I'm pleased to be with you, Evan.
Very nice to have you, sir. So you are chairman of the National Endowment for the Humanities and have been for several years now. I'm sure you can pronounce the state of the humanities as healthy for us. Give us a sense of the
humanities,
the world you're in.
As a discipline, are very strong. In fact, if you think of America in terms of leadership, it's impressive how in so many fields we still lead the world, but there is hardly a field of academia that America is not in the forefront, and led by the humanities. Now, some of the trends are less happy. State budgets are being restricted. Funding for Americans' universities in terms of the humanities are declining.
Right.
Choices of students on what to major in is shrinking when it comes to the humanities. And we could give up our leadership if we're not very careful.
Now, of course, you're not the Secretary of Higher Education or the chairman of the National Endowment of Universities, but you do know that the cost of tuition
is going
up every place, and states are saying that they can't afford to provide as much in the way of resources. So what do we do about that? If the humanities fall in the forest and no one hears them, what do you do if you've got great programs but nobody to take advantage of?
Well, one of the ways to look at it is what is the cost of support, and one of the ways to look at it is what is the cost of ignoring the humanities.
Right, the cost not to support.
And we're in a world that is shrinking, and what does that mean? Does it mean that you don't need to learn about the history and culture of other societies, or that you should? And does it mean that you don't need to know about the backgrounds of your neighbors, or that you should? And my view is very simple. If we're going to get along in a world of weapons of mass destruction, a world of terrorism, a world in which there's a huge amount of variety in this country, it's better to know the history and culture and ideas of different people than to be closed-minded. And so the humanities are all about opening the mind.
In some ways, the problems of the world can be traced back to a lack of understanding about different cultures and different people, right?
I think that's very valid, and one can argue that about the last decade. One can argue about that as an observation that applies to almost every century.
And by the way, it's not just the problem of people somewhere outside this country. There are people in this country who don't know nearly as much about places that we have wars going on, for instance.
Well, that's true, and in a way that's true of all societies.
And always has been.
But it's probably more inexcusable for the Americans not to be.
Why?
Well, because we lead the world, and what we decide can affect so many people as well as our own people. If we mismanage our economy, if we mismanage our politics, we're going to have a much harder time leading the world in ways that are sympathetic to our interests, or leading the world in ways that are sympathetic to our exports, to our economy, to our people.
Your responsibilities as chairman include a whole lot of traveling around and advocating for the kinds of programs that you allude to, but really your principal purview here are things like museums, archives, educational institutions. This is the sort of stuff that you're looking at and looking after.
Well,
right?
that's true, and we're very university centric. Yeah. We're very discipline centric, and we're also very much concerned about the preservation of the cultural values of the country. Sometimes that's symbolized by artifacts. Sometimes it's symbolized by thought. And so history, philosophy, literature are really our bedrock.
And the endowment will support sometimes exhibitions. I know the Tutankhamun exhibition was one that you all funded, but you also supported the Ken Burns Civil War Project
we surely did.
On PBS.
We will support now and again something that might appear on a public television show. Sometimes we'll have documentaries that will appear in very different formats, and they could be high school classrooms, they might be independent film festivals.
And every organization these days is trying to figure out how to deal with technology. You know, the modern world and the consumption habits of the next generation of people who will be in leadership roles in this country before too long. What do you do as the National Endowment to ensure that the message you're getting out is actually reaching people through the new platforms and new devices?
Well, we pay attention to it, but we're always a step behind everything that's happening because
that
change
can't be good.
Well, but we try to be only half a step.
Yeah.
The fact is, today, as we're talking, someone else is developing a show with multimedia effects of a nature that you and I are not perfectly comfortable with, but maybe in a year that'll be the nature of this show.
Much more interesting, I'm sure, than what we're doing.
Well, it could be, and certainly you might be interviewing people of far greater interest.
Oh, there's no one of far greater interest.
I think it's possible.
No.
Oh, yes.